Greetings, mortals. It is I, Remortis. Welcome back to Age of Wonders 4. This time with another Ravnica build with my personal favorite, the Orzhov Syndicate. Or in magic terms, white, black, plains, swamp, the powers of life and death combined. And in this game, shadow and order. And I'll be bringing the Orzhov playstyle in 2 different builds today. Let's get right into it. The Orzhov Syndicate. Here we are with the Orzhov Syndicate. As you can see, we started off with humans with the quick reflexes trait, so it's harder for us to be hit by range attacks, and the elusive trait, so we gain +6 defense and resistance against retaliation attacks and opportunity attacks. Since we're starting off with the dark culture, we will be having a lot of shock troops, and most of the time we'll negate those retaliation strikes, but for those that have like the super or the charge resistance, they will be retaliate. At least we can get a little bit of defense against that. And so if our archers have to move, maybe they can survive a little bit easier. Pretty easy, pretty nice traits to have on the defensive, kind of aggressive defense, I guess you could call it. So as you can see here, we went with the dark culture, and we will also use one for the light culture as well. There's 2 different builds for these guys. They can go either way. I personally prefer the dark build, and we'll go on to it later. One of my favorite traits is, and I think is really fantastic for this playstyle, is ritual cannibals. It'll allow you to maintain your troops on the battlefield by killing enemies, and you can, or your allies even, and you can eat their corpse to gain 15 temporary hit points, which is help make your front line stay there a little longer, or say if you're something snuck onto your back line and they hurt one of your archers or something like that. You could eat a corpse nearby to regain that health so they can get back to closer to maximum firepower. Then you got Knight of 10 alignment, which can be impactful for your builds. I usually tend to stay neutral, but there are benefits for being good or evil. And then lastly, you can gain a lot of mana and food by killing non-magic and origin units. So like pretty much a lot of these units that are guarding your resources, you're going to be killing them anyway, so you might as well harvest some more food and mana, and the mana generation's gonna be nice too to help maintain all of your summons that you're gonna have. Then I also opted for runesmiths. I just wanted a materium for this particular build, just so I like to spread out my technologies. There's a lot of different choices that we will go over in just a moment. But for runesmiths, I quite enjoy because I wanted to start with an extra polearm unit. Since the dark does not have a shield unit, you'll get a tier 2 polearm unit to help you out in the beginning, which can matter in brutal difficulty. But we'll go right into the other perks now. So you can decide to go with the dark culture, which I opted to go for because I really like the Cull the Weak, which is their core feature, which will grant them extra damage against targets with weakened, and with this build we obviously have lots of ways to make weakened happen. And then you also get regeneration whenever you hit somebody with weakened. And if you have multiple hits, it will stack each time. Really fun ability. I really like this faction, which just really fits the playstyle, especially with this build. However, Orzhov is light after all, and you can also do a more religious playthrough. They have a lot of cool stuff that they can do. They have this main feature is called Awakened. If I can click the damn thing. Awakened, which will make all of their whatever unit is awakened to have spirit a hefty amount of spirit damage, and we can make it apply to all units, not just our base units, so all of our undead as well. It's just really up to you what your playstyle is. The high magic or the high culture playthrough will not necessarily need to keep stacking a lot of the weekend or the tomes that will allow us to apply weakening to everyone. So it's really up to you. They're both very good factions to play as, and if you decide to go with the dark faction, you want to probably start with an order tome first. So for example, in this playthrough, I started with the Tome of Faith. If you go with the high magic or the high culture, let's get over here.
Choose your first tome.
I would probably pick the Tome of Souls to start off with, just so we can get a little bit of order and a little bit of shadow in our tech tree as we play the game to start off with.
What is
All right,
their
let's go
origin
over
culture?
the different society
What
traits.
defines their society?
All right, let's go over the society traits. There's a lot of really good, flavorful Orzhov traits. So this build, I use ritual cannibals and runesmiths. However, it depends on the kind of Orzhov play you want to go through. If you want to be like the moneymaker influencer type, you would probably want to get the silver-tongued ability, which will mean so you can do pronouncements with friendship or rivals with your other adversaries for 50% less. Trade deals from free cities cost you minus 100% resources, so they're free, which is very nice. And you'll get some extra scouts, and also have the diplomatic focus, because you get another Whispering Stone. So you just start off with that off the bat. So if you go with this playthrough, or play style, I should say, you'd probably want to grab the Silver Tongued and just have your scouts look for the enemies, or the free cities, high and low, both in the underground and above. So that way you can try to corrupt them or persuade them to be on your side, and also get all the free bonuses that come along with it. If you decide to go that way, you might as well get the Banner Lords as well, or one of these other order affinities. However, they're not particularly strong in my opinion for the builds that we're going to go through. So Ritual Cannibals I think is a must-have, and then your second ability is up to you. You can go for the manipulative money-making one with Silver Tongues, which can end up being very powerful depending on the map and settings you have enabled on it. Because you can at least get 3 to 4 vassals pretty early on, and all of them feeding you all kinds of resources for free, which is really nice to have. If you want to go for a pretty tall game, you can go for Perfectionist Artisans. Pretty good book, or good perk, I should say. You'll start with your tier 3 unit, which is your knight. Just be careful because it's a shock troop, and it might not be as powerful as starting with that right off the bat versus compared to other factions. Like if you were the high faction and you had this ability, the tier 3 unit for them is really powerful and will help definitely carry you through a lot of battles because it has lots of AoE and just does massive damage. But the only downside is your stuff will be a lot slower. However, if you have the Silver Tongue, the bit perk, you'll be able to negate that if you can find cities to trade, or find free cities to trade you production for free. Another good ability would be the Wonder Architects, just to there's some pretty cool wonders that can synergize you, especially the undead ones. To help you generate souls and stronger heroes, or the hero resource generation if you're in a crypt. Great builders I don't touch. If you're doing a high infestation map, Fabled Hunters is really good because our dark archers and even the high archers are really strong, and you just get a lot more resources. And especially if you combine Fabled Hunters with ritual cannibals, you'll just be getting so many resources from fighting things. You'll snowball pretty quickly. Adept Settlers is always a very good neutral perk to grab. If you wanted to have a more caster-oriented build, you could go for Powerful Evokers, which will make all of your support and battle mages a bit stronger, and also give you more mana, especially if we're going to be casting quite a bit of summons and such, so that's a pretty good ability to have. So yeah, to summarize this, Ritual Cannibals I think is a must for this playthrough, and then you can choose what else you want to have. You can go for Perfectionist Artisans, you can go to Silver Tongued, you can go for Fabled Hunters. It's up to you at the end of the day. A caveat though, if you go with Silver Tongue, be mindful that you start with a scout unit, and that's not really going to help you very much in combat. So if you're on a brutal playthrough, the Dark faction is pretty vulnerable at the beginning. On that note, let's talk about our hero and their starting equipment. So no matter for which type of culture you're going to go through, your hero you'll want to have a Wizard King, because we're going to be testing a lot of spells, and this will help us do that. By the higher, the more experience your hero gains, the more casting and magic will be able to cast throughout the game. Not to mention they have the best, I think, some of the better customizations options. So, if you are starting as the Dark Culture, your first few units are Shock units and Archers. And depending on what other perk you have started with, you'll either start with your Battle Mage or your other spear unit. So you don't really have a very tanky front line. So there's a few options you can pick for this build. Now, I strongly suggest having your hero start with the Sword of Shield, either the Tyrant's Sword of Shield or the Goateer Sword of Shield. Both work just fine. You could have them start with an axe to have you to really further embrace that shock playstyle. I wouldn't recommend this, but it definitely is an option. I personally really enjoy going with the Druid Staff because it gives you the ability called Sap Strength, which is an AoE ability that your hero can do, which will sap your enemies, giving them 2 stacks of weakened, which will obviously common with the Dark Culture's Cull the Weak, and also increase your strength by 10% damage up to 5 times. And each time you sap anybody, you'll receive a strengthened for each stack of weakened that you inflict on the enemy. So just hitting 3 units with this spell, you will get 5 stacks of strength. However, I don't keep this Druid Staff the entire time. I'm just picking it for this Sap Strength ability. Then you can just take off the staff and just fight with the regular sword and board. And you'll be just as tanky as the others. You just won't have that beginning start rate, which I don't think is really that important. So yeah, that's what you would do with the hero. And then I'll get into their skills a little bit later. As for the
what is their
high
origin
version
culture?
of this,
What defines their society? What is your ruler's origin?
you'll also start with the Wizard King, and they, however, do start with the shield unit, and they have spears pretty early, and they have archers. So I would probably start with a similar build. So for your high hero, you could either start with the Druid Staff to get that Sap Strength ability. However, your high units don't really care if things are weakened or not. You can start off with a Magic Orb to do damage, and just do magic damage, which is a pretty solid option since they only have really solid magic user at tier 3. They do have a support unit, but a tier 3 one is very powerful. And you also be able to get their similar AoE abilities by just being high. So I highly encourage picking a magic hero. However, you also can do a sword and board, or you also can do a great axe, since you won't have a shock cavalry until tier 3, so you might as well get one. Actually, they don't have shock cavalry or shock units at all. My mistake. But you'll be having those in yourself if you use the great axe or big weapon, or if you have the bone golems. Now let's get into a game to get you an idea of what
is your ruler's
we want for
origin?
skills. So if you start with the Dark Culture, I decided to go with the Tome of Faith book as the first book. Mostly, so we have more ways to heal ourselves outside of combat with these army heal to out of combat map ability, which can help heal an army, which can help you just keep your troops moving and keep your momentum going. You have Faithful Whispers, which can tie into a more free city oriented playthrough. You don't have to grab this, it's optional, but it also depends on your build. Say if you took the Shadow Whisperers trait, this would be a good one to grab as well. You have the Chaplain. It's an okay support unit. Can help heal things, help buff things. It also can provide Spirit Blast. I think it actually does any... Yeah, I don't think it does anything else other than just a pure attack. Not a bad unit. I usually maybe get 1 or 2 of these my entire playthrough. Depends on what happens. The Staff Mending ability is pretty good because we're going to have a few support units in our armies. Just gives them a free heal in Mending Touch, and then it does not cost any action points, and has a pretty decent range. Not bad to have for all support units, even ones that aren't actually healers. And then you also get the city structure called the Convent. City Stability above Unstable will gain this. Since we're a dark playthrough, you don't usually need to care about stability, so you might be unstable or below, but it won't affect you negatively because we're dark. And we have buildings to affect that. However, there are other buildings that you can build, or even wonders that you can acquire that will help you assist in the stability of your city, which could actually make this quite useful to get that extra knowledge and mana. But we won't be lacking for mana and knowledge in this build. As for buildings, we will get our Abbey, which will help you get a ton of knowledge if you have a lot of farms. I don't typically usually have a lot of farms in my territories. It depends on what I'm going for. Usually I have a lot of research posts, or I have a lot of conduits, but if you have a research post like farm, I guess you call it, or a grouping, you could have this one on your edge closer to your farm, so that way you get a little bit extra knowledge. Decent building. And then you also get the free mending touch ability like your support units do for your hero if you decide to scale into it. Free healing's always nice, and it has a pretty short cooldown. 15 hit points. Doesn't cost you any extra points. Might as well grab it. Tome of Faith, not bad choice to start off with. And then the other tome we will be starting off with is the Tome of Souls. Mostly so we can start getting our soul generation and be able to produce skeletons, as well as the Bone Golem upgrade for your skeletons. You can consume 2 skeletons to make this Bone Golem with a spell. However, you can also craft or produce Bone Golems from your city for a cost of 30 souls. Ultimately, it's about the same price as this overspell. It's just say you have 2 wounded skeletons out in the distance, or where your main army is, in an insane army, you can combine them together and make a Bone Golem. So it's about cheaper in the sense that it'll save you some turns for getting your Bone Golem up to your front lines. The Soulbind army, I don't ever use this spell. It can be useful if you're really hurting for souls. You can target an enemy before you attack them, and they'll be soulbound, which will give them more souls per kill. Soulfire, a decent ability, but the main drawback is that it costs 10 souls to cast. It can do quite a bit of damage, but there's better spells out there that don't cost souls. Soul Overflow, a decent spell. It can buff your troops by giving them a little 20 maximum hit points. I don't believe it heals them though, so you gotta cast it before they take damage, which will help strengthen your numbers and kind of reduce the effects of the damage you take, since they'll have more health per your model. And then you also get 1 point strengthened, which is 10% damage, but the reason you grab this is so you can just cleanse everything. Have all your negative status effects removed. Pretty solid 1 hex AoE spell. Does not cost souls. Pretty good, pretty decent ability. And then you got the Soul Binders. Since we're going to have quite a bit of mages and support units down the road, might as well give them a 90% chance to inflict Soulbound, which is quite similar to that other ability, so that we just get extra souls. Bit easier, or a bit better of a talent, since it's just an enhancement. And if you're running the Rune Smith build, it'll be cheaper to maintain. Alright, and then as for the perk, we will also get the same ability for our hero. However, I feel like it's not necessarily worth it for your hero, because there's other things you should be grabbing. But if you have an extra point and you say fuck it, go for it. On to the tier 2 tomes. So since we're already in Shadow, might as well go to the Tome of Necromancy. You can go with the Tome of Necromancy first, and or you can go with the Tome of Beacon, but we'll get to that. So with the Tome of Necromancy, we have Restore Undead. This is quite similar to our other healing ability, but it only affects undead units. Rotting Explosion, if you have a zombie, you can make it explode, dealing 15 frost and blight damage and applying Decaying. And Decaying is very useful because enemies cannot regain hit points while doing so, and the AI loves to use healing spells. Then we have the ability in combat for Raising Skeletons. It's a nice AoE ability to turn corpses into zombies, and they'll be able to attack immediately. However, they cannot move until their next turn, but they can attack if there's something in range. Necrotic Magic, another nice ability to have on your battle mages and support units if they're attacking, because they can apply Decaying. And then we have the Necromancer, pretty solid support unit. It has Raised Dead, Strengthened Undead, and Corpse Eating. And if you also have the Light Tome that we had earlier, we will be able to have him heal as well. And the main reason you want to pick the Necromancy book is to get the Soul Well, which will help you with your Conduit or Research Post farms, and help provide you with souls. And if you have a few more cities with that, you can get more souls. Good stuff. And then you got the Unholy Leader support perk, which is pretty nice because you're eventually going to have quite a bit of undead. Then let's go into our order tomes, and Tome of the Beacon. This is a very good tome for this build. So we got Mighty Meek, which will reduce the cost, or make all of our tier 1 units faithful, which reduces their upkeep by 10%. And there's going to be other abilities that we have through our other tomes that will benefit from them being faithful. It also increases the damage they do by 1 spirit damage, which will add up if you have a lot of little crappy zombies and skeletons. They're plucking away at the enemy. Then we have the Conjure Divine Beacon. It's a really nice summon, like a little obelisk you summon. It will heal people or heal allies within a 2 hex radius, and will give them morale and hit points every turn. And it can also be used as a distraction for your enemies. By having 60 health, it could be useful sometimes. Come in clutch. So, Covenant of the Faith. This is a pretty good spell because any troops you get with Rally the Lieges will automatically have Faithful, and that will include the higher tier stuff, the higher tier troops, which is nice. But the main reason to use this spell is for Covenant of the target vessel gains the player 10 Imperium per turn. That is huge, especially if you can cast this on multiple vassals. So, while you're doing your campaign, you might be vassalizing cities more so than taking them under your own. Mostly so you can use this and get lots of Imperium. And then my favorite reason for picking this tome is the Summon Lightbringer. This is a really cool unit that is super thematic in my opinion. It totally fits the Orzhov vibe. First off, it's a floating skeleton-looking thing, like a big worm, but it has a big skull on its head, so it has that undead feel, and it's considered a celestial. But the reason you grab this is for the ability called Convert, or Convert, however you want to pronounce it. It's a 6% chance of making units mind-controlled, which will make them fight for you. And if it doesn't work, they become weakened, which will obviously combo with our Dark Culture. So like, oh no! I mean, obviously it'd be great if you can mind-control the enemy, but if you don't, they're weakened, and you'll be doing extra damage with Cull the Weak. And then you also will have the perk, or the hero perk, to make all of your faithful units have 20 morale at the start of battle, which can help you get more critical strike damage, as you can see here. Let's move on to the tier 3. This tome can be quite good for the high-based playthrough, since you can get a nice shock unit in the Tyrant Knight, which is a strong cavalry unit. So a lot of people would suggest going with Tome Subjugation, mostly because it's kind of a cool theme for it, and it is very Orzhov flavor. However, it's not the greatest of books. Yeah, you get this cool Tyrant Knight, which is pretty strong, but we also get a tier 3 shock troop unit in the Dark Knight, or the Dark Culture, if you went that route. However, one of the interesting spells for this book is the Fauna Automatum Diva spell, which only occurs on routing enemies. And they can permanently become mind-controlled and join you. So you get free unison through this. Pretty cool, honestly, but you have to be winning. So it won't help you win the fight, but it'll help you get troops at the end of the fight. So there's probably some trickery you can do to get this to work for you. Then you get a city structure to help you with stability and give you a gold. Not a bad building. There's better out there. I wouldn't pick the book just for this. And then you get Intimidating Aura, but there's other ways to get this. Overall, I would not necessarily recommend this book, but you can if you want to. I would probably do it just for this final ultimatum ability if I had to. Let's check out the other books. So also for a tier 3 book, we have The Great Transformation. Now this is, I'm sure you've heard many places elsewhere, that The Great Transformation is a good book because of Whiteborn. You can turn all of your units undead and you'll get lifesteal whenever you attack. Great stuff. But you should keep in mind that by turning your troops undead, they will be weak to spirit and fire resistances, so be careful if your enemies are using those. You also become immune to poison and some other benefits as well. You have no morale change, or you don't affected by morale. Which can be a good thing and a bad. You won't be able to gain critical strike, but you also won't rout either. Then you got the Necrotic Spires, which is just something for city structures for fighting siege battles. I've never really fought a siege battle on the receiving end from AI. I've just been too aggressive, I suppose. Then you get the Domain of Death, which will target a city, which will make your troops deal 10% more damage if they're undead, and then also get you a little more stability, so I guess you can do some combinations with that. That's a great structure. You can make any of your resource nodes give you extra mana. However, if you lose the province, you'll lose it. It can be useful if you're really hurting for mana, or just have mana to burn and you want to make more mana, so go for it. Then you got Fetid Legion, which will grant all of your units a weakening aura, which was just stacked with the dark stuff. So, very good book for the dark culture build. And you also get the Soul Harvest ability, as other books of the Shadow quality, or the Undead, I mean. And you also get Weakening Aura for your hero. But if all your troops have it, why do you need it? There's other points you could be spending it on. So for tier 4 books, we will have the Tome of Exaltation. So it depends on how your playthrough is going, but you could turn your troops into undead through the Whiteborn transformation. Or you could wait to hold out and choose to make them all angels, which will turn them into celestial type, which will make them weak to frost and blight and give them spirit resistance, and also make it so you are immune to control loss immunity, meaning you won't be affected by berserk or mind controlled. You'll also be able to fly. All your troops will be able to fly and be able to move faster, and they'll become faithful, which will reduce their upkeep. Then we have the Ascended Warriors, which will you can just force your troops to gain ranks, which could be useful if they have good rank unlocks. And then another really thematic unit is the Throne of Smiting, which just looks like this old, decrepit undead. I don't even know what you want to call it, but it looks really cool and it does cool stuff. It's a tier 5 unit that will have an ability called Smiting Prayer Blast, which is a single attack. It will hit multiple times. It will destroy fortified objects, and for each friendly faithful unit on the battlefield, you'll increase your damage on this attack. It can nuke some stuff pretty well. And not only that, but it also has Divine Vengeance. It's a massive AoE and will hurt all non-faithful units. Pretty cool. Really good unit. Not the best, but it's good. Then we got Resurrect unit. You return all dead and friendly units to full temporary hit points. We're gonna have a lot of deaths and a lot of fodder that will die too. This will bring back one, not all. It's a really good spell. And you got the Temple of the Exalted. Get even more city stability, especially if you have the combos for that. And you also get double book governor bonuses too. Very good book, and you have to keep in mind that you will need at least 6 infinity. If you got at least 1 tome for each tier, you'll be fine. And then let's move on over to the Shadow books. Then we have the Tome of the Reaper. Starting off with Siege Project, you'll gain 40 souls and you get 6 zombies to fight for you. Pretty good if you are sieging something and need some fodder units to tank up their artillery strikes if you didn't manage to break them. You'll have an ability called Mark for Death. Target non-hero will get the ability, or get Despair, which will make them lose morale, and then also give the ability Mark for Death, and it's like decaying. But I don't think you can cleanse this as easily. But they also will die once this effect wears off. Pretty cool spell. Alright, then you got Greater Reanimation, which will recover 80% of its hit points for non-hero units. It'll become undead and it will die at the end of the battle, so you can use that to transform one of your enemy's big units to turn the tide in your favor. Then you have a pretty interesting ability called Harvest Population. Target friendly city loses 1 population and you gain 60 souls. If the city doesn't have a hero or governor governing it, you'll also lose stability. I'm not sure if you can actually use it on allied cities, but I imagine something will happen if you harvest your friend's city and not your own. Then you got the Summon Reaper, a pretty good unit. It is, I think it's a shock troop actually, or maybe it's just a standard troop. Anyways, it has melee strike. It only hits once, and it will apply weakening. It has greater corpse consumption. It will eat. Normally, corpse consumption only gives you 15 hit points. This will give you 40, and it also strengthen you. Then you also have a neat ability called Finger of Death, and you just have a chance to obliterate something. And even if you don't manage to kill it, you'll still hit for 45 frost damage, which is still really good. And if a non-undead unit dies from it, you'll be able to turn it into a zombie. Really cool ability. And then you also get greater corpse consumption for your hero. Really good on melee, especially melee fighters that need that health. Alright, then let's go into the Materium. There are some good books that you can choose here in the Golden Realm, since the Orzhov are known for making money, so here's lots of really good ways to get money. Luxury markets, the buy now is cheap, 25% cheaper, and can be used 2 times per world map turn. So it could up to be 50% cheaper. So if you're in a rush to buy purchase buildings or troops, definitely go with this route. Then you get the Gold Golem, which is a polar arm unit that will turn enemies to gold and brings home the spoils. So Gilded Strike has a chance when you attack somebody, has a chance to become gilded, which means they'll become stunned, and when the unit dies, the winner of the battle will gain 20 gold per unit tier. If you have a few of these can make you a decent amount of gold, but they need to have the final strike, I believe. Then Strike Gold deals damage to all gilded units within 3 hex, and if they are killed, you'll get healed for it. Pretty cool. It's a fun unit. It's very niche, but it's fun. Then you have the Gold Touch Minor Erased Transformation. Cast this and all your troops will get 2 resistance, which is just really good on its own. But then you also get 1 gold per population in your city, so if you have some really wide and tall cities, this will be good to get a little extra money income, or gold income. Then we got Gilding Blast, grants units 1 hex of 90% chance to become gilded. So I think this one doesn't have to actually kill it, but as long as they have the gilded condition and then they die, you get money. So if you want to make some money, this is a good way to do it. In the Gold Golem and the Gilding Blast ability, if you know you're about to kill them. Or the units, I mean. Then you also get the Regent Refinery, which will give you 20 gold for each magical material in this city's domain. And depending on how you build your cities or how you scout them out, you can get some serious change with this. And then the building you can get out of this is called Bazaar of Wonders, which is a mine that makes even more gold. But you should keep in mind that this is actually pretty easy to get this effect, because it needs to have 1 unique adjacent province improvement in your main city that you first start off with. Generally speaking, all of the provinces nearby are going to be unique resources, and this will be able to get off quite easily, make even more money. And then you get the Gilded Magic perk to make your critical attacks with magic attacks inflict gilded for your hero. But in order to get this book, you need to have 6 points of Materium Affinity. How are you going to do that? Well, that's why I decided to go with the Runesmith perk, so I can get 1 piece of Materium Affinity for that way. When you level up your hero, sometimes, depending, obviously, the level 5 and level 10 ultimate choices are all random, but if you happen to pick the Materium perk, that will also give you another affinity. But let's look at some of the elder books in the Materium that we might consider grabbing, so we can get up to 6. There is the Tome of Transmission for Tier 3, which is kind of like a precursor to the Golden Realm. However, this one doesn't really make you money, but it does make your troops a little more adaptive to gain resistances, defenses, and also lose lightning resistance, so be careful for that end. Then you also get the other transformation called Adaptive Armor. Once per turn, whenever an enchanting unit sustains non-physical damage, such as magic damage, they will gain Bolster Resistance, which will increase their resistances, and also help them defend against debuffs. Pretty cool ability to have. Then you got Melt Armor, which is a decent ability to help melt your enemies with Sunder Defense and fire damage. Then you got Transmute Resources. Converts their mana income, gaining gold production food and equal to 75% of the mana income. So if you have a really high mana town, or a city that is generating lots of mana because you have a really well-placed mana farm, this could turn into other means of production, food, and gold. Other ways to advance your city. Then you got the Transmuter. It's a decent spellcaster. It has the multi-attack. It will help inflict Sunder Defense on your enemies, and grants his Bolster Defense on your allies. So it kind of steals it and messes with your opponents. Pretty cool. I like that a lot. And then you got Petrify. It's a 1 hex radius of 90% chance of becoming stunned, which can be quite useful. Decent ability, or a decent unit. It's a decent book overall, but it's not mandatory. Then you also can get the adaptive armor for your hero. If you have any melee or frontline heroes, this is a good perk to have for your
fodder and distractions.
And then we have the tier 2 tomes of Tome of Winds and Tome of Artificing. If I were had to choose, I would probably pick Tome of Artificing. Enchanting is a decent tome if you are really desperate for some Materium Affinity to get the Golden Realm. And obviously the tier 5 books are really good, so you can just pick whichever one you can get, either the Order, the Shadow, or the Materium. Alright, so for hero abilities, for the ultimates, I really enjoy the Restoration ability, which will heal a friendly target for 40 hit points and also dispel all negative effects for them. However, if the unit is already dead, you'll be able to resurrect them for 60% of their hit points. It'll be temporary hit points, mind you. After the battle, they will only have 1 hit point, so they'll need to take up a couple of turns to recover. Other abilities I really enjoy for the hero skill is the Dark ability. I forget the name off the top of my head, but it will do shadow damage to an AoE, and any corpses that are in that spot will be turned into undead. Zombies, I believe. But there's also another ultimate ability, which is called just flat out called Summon Undead, which will summon 3 tier 1 undead units. The reason I don't like that spell is because you only can cast it once per battle, which is why I prefer the, I think it's called Dark Ritual. I believe that's what it is, Dark Ritual. Another good ability is the nature ability, Mass Rejuvenation. It's just a blanket AoE heal, and I believe it gives them regeneration as well, so that's a really solid ability. Alright, as for the skills that you're going to want to have your hero go into, so if you start with the Druid Staff, you'll always have the ability Sap Strength to help apply Weakened everywhere. And then I usually tend to grab Cull the Weak to help keep my hero healed up after things have been weakened. I like to grab Experienced Leader to help level up your units quicker. I grab the Unit Upkeep Reduction and Inspiring Leader. And then Precision Training to give your units better accuracy and critical strike. And then I also grab Restore to help him heal a little bit if I need to. It's a very, very good build. And then you can decide, after you do the support skills, you can decide to make him a full-on melee tank, or I opted to go for the Mage route. The Mage route is probably stronger on the high culture because you have access to the really nasty Holy AoE. I don't have it here because this is a dark hero at the moment. So instead, I get, I believe it's called Sundering Curse. It's just a single target ability. It hits pretty hard, and it will apply Sunder defense and resistances, and then also inflict weakened. It's the same ability that your tier 2 mages have. Alright folks, there you have it. Although a bit lengthy, this is the Orzhov build I present you. Please go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Farewell for now.